think we are now.
Preston got a little bit of a singing voice there. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear.
Get that harmonizing going.
Next episode, acapella killers.
Damn.
That'd be so dope. Okay, anyways.
Welcome back, True Crime Drunks.
Or like I like to call this episode, True Crime Drunks that are just a little hungover.
Tad bit. Just a tad bit hungover.
Happy late Independence Day.
Yeah, these lights are a little bright in here.
It's chilling.
It's, it's
chilling.
It's a vibe.
I definitely woke up and been like, ugh.
I'm Wes McBee, and
I'm
always,
Holly, or Hollis McGee, or Holly Lee.
Hollis McGee.
Hollis McGee. That's my rapper name.
Damn, dropping fire beats. Will you go
fire beats. I feel like I have to be in the UK to be Hollis McGee, though.
Can you go get a face tat tomorrow that says Hollis McGee?
I don't know. I mean, our tattoo shops are kind of closed, so I might have to see if anyone has an appointment, but I think my dad might disown me, so definitely have to get some makeup.
I think it's worth it.
It's worth it. But anyways, welcome back to another episode of True Crime Drunks. The topic today, Mary Bell, the 11-year-old serial killer.
It's crazy that... So I want to preface by saying that we heard about Mary Bell and wanted to cover her.
Yeah.
Just because of the fact that, you don't hear about a lot of serial killers that are underage.
So young.
And we actually did find out that there is a list. There is a lot of them. More than we thought there would be. But Mary Bell is kind of the most infamous one. And I think one of the main reasons why she's infamous is not just because of being a serial killer or a murderer at the age of 11, but it was through strangling, which seems atypical.
It is, and it's also too. I think it's because also too the preference. She's a serial killer, but not because she's more of a murderer. But I think because of her crimes being so heinous, that's what gives her the serial killer title. But the fucked up part is because she's also 11.
Yeah.
She's strangling them, but it's not a quick strangle.
Well, and I think too the biggest. So obviously, when this happened, she made huge headlines, and not just because she's 11, but because of the two boys that she murdered, Martin Brown, aged 4, and Brian Howe, aged 3.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, anytime you get into anything, even under 18, it makes huge news, but the fact that they were under 5...
Yeah.
That created a huge uproar.
They're still toddlers almost.
Yeah, and that was back in December of 1968 in West End of Newcastle.
Yeah.
So,
England.
Basically, I think we're both under the assumption that this was not... I don't think Mary Bell is a serial killer by nature.
Yeah.
But because of how she was raised and how she grew up.
It's by nurture.
It was definitely not ideal.
It was not an ideal place. So let's start it off with, what every true crime podcast lacks? A tasteless joke. All right, so this is for my my Vine fans, R.I.P. Vine. All right, so when Mary Bell got captured, right, the police officers, you know how police officers, they want to bait you and try to get you angry so you would confess?
Yeah.
And so they're they're taunting her. They're like, there's no way you did it. What are you? There's no way a 9-year-old girl can kill anybody. She looks them straight in the eye. She's like, shut the fuck up. I'm 11.
11? God. Vine is...
R.I.P. Vine, but also so Vine. Relevant because she was 11.
Yeah, she was 11.
I tried to come up with a better joke, but I was like, no, that's it.
You got a full send Vine jokes.
You got to still send R.I.P. Vine.
Yeah, it's always forever in our hearts.
We're always in our hearts. But, anyways, back to Mary Bell, the classic lady of the hour. So she was born in 1957. I don't have a date of birth, but she was born around then. She was born in England. What was the city again? Newcastle. Yes. It's hard because I'm not really good with their layout and geography, and they have so many little towns within a town that
it was Newcastle upon Tyne, which I don't exactly know where that is specifically.
And I don't really know what that means because, she was in Newcastle, but, she was going to other places to kill them with anyways, it was really confusing. But so she was born in 1957. Her mom was a single mom because they don't really know who her dad was, but like a guy came into their lives because when she was like 3 or 4, because that's how she got her last name, is from this guy. So she doesn't really have like obviously a dad. She has a single mom who's a drug addict, a prostitute, married to a man who beats her children, everything else. Oof.
I mean, it was very heinous. I even saw that there was a book made in regards to Mary Bell's mom, and not only was she a prostitute and a drug addict, but she was a dominatrix. So
so she was a dominatrix prostitute, especially during this time period where that was, the cliche,
very cliche.
You have missionary or you don't talk about it.
Lights
or you
off.
Don't do it. Lights
none
off.
Of that.
Oh man, you have a candle burning? Sinners.
Jesus is always watching.
But
I think why that's relevant is I almost wonder if the mom, now granted it could be the drugs, it could be the prostitution, it could be the awful living situation, but if that dominatrix lifestyle
kind of
like she couldn't split it, she couldn't be a dominatrix in her job
and not her
life because she did abuse Mary Bell physically, mentally. I mean,
she so during this time she was also very poor. They lived in the poorest part, and her mom would even prostitute her 5-year-old daughter so they can make bills and pay for her drug addiction. So on top of everything that's going on with Mary Bell and her parents, she's also being into this lifestyle that she didn't sign up for. She's forced to have sex with men at an unreasonable age. No person should ever be sold off to by their parent, which is devastatingly sad. But so she...
Well, and I think, too, that says a lot about her crime specifically, is not only was she getting getting sold for money and drugs, but she was around so much domestic abuse and so much domestic violence. And, a lot of it is, there's not a lot of stories about specific situations, but I try and put my mind in that situation where, what we know, I can only imagine that lifestyle because, how many different guys are coming in, how many fights are happening, how many days are drugs getting slang in the house, how many days are, people coming in and beating each other up. When you're at that young of an age, you copy what you see.
Yeah, and you can tell that a lot with her murders as well.
Yeah.
Because, so on top of her mom whoring her out, essentially, and doing awful things, her mom even tried to kill her multiple times. But before the age of 5, because by the age of 5, I think she gave up and was then you can make money, I guess.
Yeah.
But she would, strangle her, but not kill her all the way. And she was found once with, a ton of, sleeping pills.
Yep. And,
she obviously ingested some, but not enough to obviously kill her. But, enough that it was noticeable that she had these... I don't remember the drug name, but she was given drugs. She was beat all the time. She had a lot of things going on.
And I would not be surprised at all, and I couldn't find any information on this, but with her mom being an active drug user, I imagine that when she was born, she had to have had problems, right?
Right.
A lot of the stuff that in regards to Mary Bell that we're going to talk about is somewhat speculation just based off of the information we do have.
Yeah.
And what I kind of think is maybe her mom had a guy over making money, or maybe it was just a fling or whatever, got her pregnant, and she looked at Mary Bell and was like, you're ruining my life. You're ruining the fun.
Yeah.
You're ruining my career.
She didn't want, and her mother was just mentally unstable as it was,
Absolutely.
and so she definitely couldn't take care of a child, because she was 17 when she had Mary Bell.
Right.
She was 17. She even tried to, at, an abortion clinic, is what I was reading on here, was, her mom even just tried to, give her to random strangers and, take my baby, I don't want it.
No.
But she would be, already at the abortion clinic being a little too late, I gave birth to it, take it now. Just, she did not want this child. And it, even reflected in, her school life a lot, because she was very, she was an angry child. She would have like fits of rage.
Yep.
They talked to her about her a lot, just being like 1 second like okay, and the next it's like, oh, it's Mary Bell having a fit again.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because like when they're talking about her as like a child, it just kind of shows like how people obviously didn't care about children that much then, because they would just like, they're like, oh, just another Mary Bell rage, you know, like it wasn't really like, I think no one ever investigated her home life, because also during this time too, this area especially, they had like tons of abandoned buildings. Kids were literally just left on the streets to hang out and play while both of their parents worked. It was just kind of like the system they were raised in. It mostly is that
they're definitely
it was definitely a nature kind of thing, a nurture kind of thing, because it was like she lived in a place where it was not uncommon to leave your kid on the street for 8 hours a day so you can make money and then they'll come home.
Yeah.
Or your mom's a prostitute. Like that was a little extreme for that area.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
Still, like, it wasn't uncommon. It wasn't unheard of. It wouldn't have warrant Mary Bell to be taken out of the home.
No, she's 100% a product of her environment. It's possible that she may have had chemical problems too. Like maybe she did have some sort of weird thing going on, but I think this is 100% a product of
her. Yeah. Well, and also too because like, yeah, we can make the assumption maybe because when she was a child and almost died of drugs.
Yeah.
She would, that could change it. But then if you see, when we talk about her later life, you can definitely tell it's definitely a product of her nurture, not her nature.
Right, and one of the interesting facts that I would like to bring up is and this opens a can of worms, but she, at the age of, I can't remember, 6 or 7, going through school, there was a lot of times where she did get in trouble for physically and mentally abusing other children. Yeah. And it was becoming a regular thing. And that bothers me just because of the fact that I get that the area that they lived in was not an uppity, rich area.
Yeah.
But no one sat her down and was like, hey.
You need to fucking calm down.
And that could be, maybe there is more to the story that we don't know, because I really think that...
There's not a lot of information on her.
Yeah, and as you find out, I think that when Mary Bell did get... So she was convicted in 1968 of the 2 murders.
Yeah.
I think we come to find out that maybe when she gets sentenced and the time that she has to do, that structure and relief from not being...
Just floating, basically.
Yeah, like she doesn't have to go home and deal with all these heinous things, that may have actually been the best situation for her.
Yeah, but... Which
is awful to say. Like, it's sad to think that the best situation for an 11-year-old kid is, a boarding school and prison.
Yeah, a boarding school and then prison, but... Yeah, but during this time, she did have, like, a best friend, Norma Bell. No relations. I think it's so funny, though, that they had the same last name, but no relations. But that was one of her best friends, who was actually older than her, but they think that Norma Bell did have a little bit of mental problems because she wasn't a violent kid at all, but she was definitely a follower. Mm. And so that's why we'll talk a lot about also Norma Bell, but she doesn't get convicted at all. Because Mary Bell was looked at as the leader of all of it. Which, respect, because, like, yeah, but, like, at the same time, I mean, like, Norma still did a bit of heinous things. That's why I'm, like, still confused as to how she got away with all of it.
Right.
But we'll go back to that once we go over the murders, obviously. I'm sorry, I'm here, but I'm not here.
No, I feel you. Well, hard to come in after July 4th.
I'm just glad it wasn't on a Monday.
Yeah.
But
that would have been rough.
But anyway, so she was known during school as the seeker, and she even had like issues of like choking other children.
Yep.
And like hitting other children, and like that's why she didn't really have a lot of friends either, because people's moms still were like, you can't hang out with my kid if you're gonna beat the shit out of my kid. Like you're like, you can't hang out and do all this because
Well, and I imagine going through all the awful things that Mary Bell did, like, you mature so fast.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that physically, like, she was probably stronger than all the kids, because I imagine that she's had to deal with adults tossing her around, and at some point you have to try and defend yourself.
Yeah.
So,
you had to defend yourself because also this area too was crime ridden and violence, domestic violence even was kind of the norm.
yeah.
Everyone was dealing with something, and I think that's also why too it was kind of hard but easy to believe that these girls could do something like that because I think during this time a lot of people were like not really paying attention to the kids because they were, watching the adults because the adults were just fucking hog wild, just fucking crime and violence all day long. So it's like the product of their environment for sure. But so to the murders with Mary, the first boy who was, where is it? Early life, the murders. So the first murder took place on May 25th, 1986, and this was
I think it's
the day before her 11th birthday. So she was 10 when she did this one, but the other one she was 11.
I think the date was a little earlier than
Was it a little
86.
earlier?
She was convicted in 1968, I believe.
Because no, she was convicted in August 1968, but this happened in May 1968. It says.
Oh, no, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So they did find her pretty fast. I thought
No,
for some reason in my mind it took a while.
I thought I heard you say 86 instead of 68.
I probably did.
That's what I was saying. I wasn't sure.
You know what? I probably did.
It's
one of those. It's a Monday.
Remember, the lights are bright. People.
The lights are bright.
The lights
people.
are bright.
The lights are bright. But yeah, so the first murder happened on May 25th, 1968, before her 11th birthday, which is, what a way to celebrate your birthday.
All right.
I'm just kidding.
Just waking up and just going and strangling the neighborhood kids.
The neighborhood kids. But this one she did alone. So this one was the first time. So the first time she did it alone. I think she kind of told Norma about it and brought her into the second one. But this one she did alone. And what did she do exactly? She did it... I'm trying to think, because I know there was the little boy, and this one, the first one was, what was he?
4?
4?
Yeah.
So we found Martin Brown, which, I saw a picture of the 2 little boys, and I, cried a little, because they were so freaking cute, adorable little kids, but, so, she kind of, during this time, there were so many abandoned buildings, she kind of, took him into one of these buildings, because it wasn't uncommon for other kids to play with other kids and just take them places because they'll come back home,
Right.
Because no one's paying attention to the kids. So she takes him into this house and she strangles him and kind of just leaves him there to be found later. Because I mean, just because her family didn't care if she came home or not, some people did. Obviously,
right.
It's not like this whole town didn't give a shit about kids. So. Obviously, a 4-year-old goes missing, everyone goes and searches, and then they found his body alone. But they also kind of, because of Mary being 10 and not strong enough to, truly strangled, it almost looked like he fell. And so they originally didn't think of it as a murder. They thought it was an accident.
Right.
With him. So that's kind of how, I don't know how to best describe it, how she was able to kind of get away with it in a way is because of how, she left marks, but not really because her hands are so small and so weak.
It was a strangulation, from my understanding, that took a while instead of,
if an adult strangles a child, it's going to take a couple seconds.
Yeah, you'll smash.
But a child choking another child, I assume that would probably take forever.
I imagine it was, the process of, him, this is dark, right? But I imagine it was a struggle, and then he went unconscious, and then she just kept going until he completely stopped breathing.
Yeah,
which could be a while.
Yeah, because it doesn't give crazy amount of details. She did write a book about, or did a book about what it was, but I think she was more about her life in general, not really the murders. So
now, don't quote me on this, but I know that at least one of the boys, there was some other stuff that happened afterwards.
That was the second one. That's when Norma got involved. That's why I'm confused about Norma not getting any sentences. But I think it's also too because Norma felt guilt. Mary Bell didn't feel guilt.
Right.
Initially. But so that's what happened is they believe she did that one alone. But between that one and the second killing, she kind of told Norma, who was a couple years older than her, and then that's when they like broke into that nursery in Scottswood where that house. They were like on the outside. That's why I'm like confused about the geography because there's so many little towns within towns that I'm like.
I think
so
that
close.
Newcastle is like comparing to our city. Like Newcastle is Davis County, but then there's like Kaysville, Farmington, Bountiful. It's like I think that's how I think it is, but I'm not sure. I might be wrong.
Yeah, we'll look it up if we ever did another English person, And so her and Norma then go into break into the nursery in that area, and then like write notes about like I killed the baby, I strangled the baby, and the police really, because of like how the first body was found, the police was like, it's just some kids pranking us, like it's not real, like they didn't take it seriously, and they still just thought it was an accident to happen with that little boy. So that's what happened with the first murder, but the second murder is where it gets pretty heinous in my opinion.
Yeah, it's very
because that's because now Mary Bell is involved, Norma, and so on July 31st, 1968, they took part in this one together. So this time it was 3-year-old Brian Howe. And this one they didn't take him into an abandoned area. They took him into like a wasteland or like somewhere in Scottswood where it was just kind of like an empty field, kind of was what it sounded like. And so they strangled him, killed him, and then they came back. That's the part that kills me, is that they came back to the body and then mutilated him.
Yeah.
Because because of the autopsy, you can tell that everything that happened to him was after post-mortem. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they came back was like ballsy, but like also like...
It's hard because you have to put yourself in the mindset of an 11-year-old, right? Now, granted, she's not a typical 11-year-old. She's done things that, God, we hope most adults never have to go through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've tried to think, like, from, like, a psychology point of view, like, if this was her trying to, like, say, like, this is how I wish I could kill the people who have hurt me, but I'm so small, I can't. I have to do it to this kid. Like, and it's a man that represents probably the sexual abuse and the prostitution that she's had to do. Like,
yeah, and I think that's too because
I think it was definitely planned. I don't think they just did this and went like, hey, let's go do this right away. I think that she did formulate a lot of plans around doing this.
Yeah. Ooh, late.
Which kind of, I think, goes into why she did get convicted.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's too, like, yeah, definitely, because it's hard to tell what really happened after the fact the body died, because you're dealing with a 13-year-old and 11-year-old, their statements contradict each other, so they don't really know what happened, because, like, there's a different couple theories. So the initial theory was they killed him, left, and then Mary Bell came back and then mutilated him, because he was found with an N carved into his stomach, and then it looked like someone else carved the N into an M kind of thing. And also they used a razor and like cut off a bunch of his hair because they found hair laying around him. Yep. His legs were all shredded, and then they like mutilated his penis. And so I think that's where the abuse of men kind of come into play, why Mary Bell would have done that, is because I think she just did it by association, because like, as you know. Well,
and I think too, like, if it were to go further, it could have potentially been something that was like serial killer vibes, because it did have like, at least when I saw the hair stuff, right? Like you kind of think like, oh, is that like a trophy?
Like a trophy? Like did she cut off his hair to like keep any of it? Because like I mean they never found any of it in our personal belongings, but I mean, as a kid, you can always hide stuff and never tell anybody.
Oh, absolutely.
100%. But, so, essentially what happened was, once he died, they mutilated him. And since the kids were young... Oh, it's Kai!
Oh.
Hello! Hi. But, since that happened, it was just a lot.
It is. And it's scary to think, too, that even 11-year-olds can have that kind of
That
desire.
Yeah, which when we get a little bit later in the episode, I have quite a few different other ones that children just do that.
Right.
Because you just never think like a child could think to do that.
When I thought of one now that we've been going that we
Yeah.
can talk about later in the episode, but the whole Slenderman killers, the 2 girls.
Yeah.
Because they were under 18. I don't remember if they were like 13, 14 or whatever. We can talk about that later. But
We'll talk about that later. But yeah, so anyways, so essentially once they find this body, they're like, okay, maybe that note we found in the nursery isn't a coincidence, and maybe this second little boy correlates with the first one, because this was a month apart.
Right.
And so by August of 1968, they started to associate, but also during this time, they kind of like started looking at children more so than adults because of like the strangulation not being like adult hands and
Right.
things like that. But the thing that kind of gave them pointers to Maribel was after this happened, Maribel and Norma was hanging out, and her Norma's dad came home and literally freaked out because Maribel was strangling Norma and had to break the 2 apart. And that's when even Norma's dad was like, to the police, was like, I think I have a suspect for you.
Yeah.
This girl just tried to strangle my daughter, not even, I think, realizing his daughter was involved initially as well.
I have a weird speculation about this, and I'm curious where you sit on this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with her being involved in different things, right? And like
Yeah.
her mom being a dominatrix, do you almost think that maybe the strangulation was so common in their household that maybe she thought that that was like normal? Like,
or just like a way to get what you want from somebody?
because like in 2020, right, we all know like choking is really popular, especially when it comes in the bedroom. But back then, like,
It wasn't a thing you talked about.
it wasn't a thing you talked about. So maybe to her it was a very common, like, hey, like,
Yeah, especially too if like if she was seeing her mom be a dominatrix, because it's kind of hard because you don't really know
right.
what was happening, especially because it's been so long now. But I think you can easily say, like, yeah, probably because of her mom. And you know what? Just because your mom's a dominatrix does not mean you're going to be a serial killer by any means.
No.
But I think in this kind of setting where I think she probably saw her mom do it to other people, it could definitely, like, make sense in a sense that, especially during this time period where it wasn't common to be a dominatrix. And also, too, I don't doubt that when her mom would be annoyed with Maribel or wanted to do something, she probably choked her.
Yeah.
So it's probably just she thought she had it done to her and did it to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
And
sure
then-
it was. I mean, it's that thing, right? Like, even if you're around kids who aren't in situations like this, if you start doing something and they think that
Yeah.
you're cool or whatever, they're gonna start doing it too. Like,
Yeah, like, I mean, that's what, like, the whole,
that's how kids are.
yeah, that's how kids are. That's why the whole, dare drugs is
Yeah.
like, they're like, just because your friends do it doesn't mean you need to do it, but also you know that if your friends are doing drugs, you're probably going to end up doing drugs.
Yeah.
It's just like you do it by
Association,
association.
yeah.
And so it's, I mean, like, then that's the thing too. It's like, just because all your friends do drugs doesn't mean you're going to do drugs. But in a sense that because she's so young and impressionable, and also her mom's tried to kill her so many times before the age of 5, essentially, I wouldn't be surprised.
When something's so
If it
readily
was.
available, you typically will do it one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think it's also too kind of goes back to she definitely like thinks that she was so abused all the time. She wanted to be the center of attention, and that's why she was always a problem child. She always like in school, like she was wanting to be a show off and like have a reputation of being a person, and like she's even quoted saying as a kid, "I like hurting little things because they can't fight back."
Well, and I
And I
think.
think
Go ahead, sorry.
you know, like, yeah, going back to like how herself could never defend herself. Now she's in the power move. She's in like the position to be the one harming someone else instead of being harmed.
Well, and I think too, what we know about bullying in 2020, right, is like typically the ones who bully are always the ones who have the most problems, and
Yeah.
they don't necessarily bully just because like they like to hurt other people, but it's a cry for attention. It's a
Yeah.
cry for help, and they don't know how to ask for help because in their household
You just get hit.
you just get hit,
Yeah.
and like if someone's acting like a quote unquote a bitch, you hit them.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's a lot. I think there's a lot of very obvious things that this was going on in 2020 in a place that wasn't awful. They'd be able to stomp it out, but because poor areas, shitty school system, it sounds like.
And also, this wasn't. No one cared.
Yeah, no one cared. 1968, 60s, kids were still just fucking kids. They weren't.
They didn't have milk on cart like missing children.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing. They didn't care.
Yeah.
They were just like, oh, maybe they'll show up.
Yeah, they'll come back.
They'll come back eventually.
If they don't, we'll make a couple more.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's
cool.
easy.
It's whatever.
Everyone can do it.
Exactly. So, but yeah, so that happened, and on December 17th, 1968, she was convicted of manslaughter, not murder, but manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. And so they basically diagnosed her as classic symptoms of a psychopath. The judge described her as a dangerous threat to society, and she's a great risk to other children.
Yes.
Because it looks like she was obviously she was more into hurting children. So, but Norma, she was acquitted because when they were doing the interviews and like the psych evals and stuff, Norma had remorse and she regret doing what she did. Mary Bell had no remorse and I didn't really understand what she did wrong.
Yeah.
It was more she just didn't understand what she did wrong, and more of like, well, it is what it is.
Right, and I will give credit to the legal team on that side of it, because instead of just sending her to go rot
in jail, yeah,
they gave her different opportunities to try and. Because I mean, when you hear about all the facts, right? Like you can sit back and think like, well, fuck, if she just had a normal upbringing, like, just probably would have never happened. But because she was in such a fucked up situation, she needs help. And she's not 40. This isn't some 40-year-old lady.
And she's not even 18 yet. She's 11. She hasn't even hit her puberty yet.
Yeah.
Most girls don't even start their periods until they're like 13, 14.
Right.
And so, like, she definitely was a child when this happened.
Yeah.
And so, instead of just throwing her into jail or juvie, they actually sent her off to boarding school.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, because while she was there, you can tell how much she grew as a person, because then she was, like, talking to her mom and was like, Mom, if you just admit that you are a bad mother and that you raised me, and that this is what you did to me as a child, I would probably be getting out of here now. And her mom was like, I'm never going to admit. Because her mom didn't want her reputation ruined. But yet, her mom would still then go off and sell pictures that she drew, letters, talk about her all the time to the media for money.
Yeah, all the time.
All the time. Yet, she would never admit to fault that because she made her daughter a child prostitute, tried to kill her, do all this stuff, that she didn't create a killer.
Her mom is a grade A scumbag.
Her mom's a grade A scumbag.
Like, it's crazy to think that you almost think that the mom should have gotten more charges than Mary Bell did.
Her mom should have gotten some kind of charge in general. On the principle alone of just prostituting her daughter out at age 5. Yeah. Should definitely have been like the kicker, because it's like
that shit happens nowadays. That lady's probably getting hung in the street.
Yeah, she would go to jail and she would die in jail.
Yeah, 100%.
100%, unless they put her away in the pedophile unit.
Yeah.
But she she goes to jail. Mary Bell goes. It's more of like she goes to like a boarding school.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like, it was definitely like a boarding school for troubled youth. Yeah. So she went to boarding school, and then when she graduated, she went to Moore Court Open Prison until she was 23?
Yes.
So 23. She was 23. But yeah, so she went to then Moore's Court Open Prison, which sounds like basically it was prison, but they made it was like prison, but it was mostly like a halfway house, it sounded like, because it was kind of like you took care of yourself and you didn't really have tons of like supervision.
No, yeah, and you definitely had more freedom to try and like figure your own shit out in a way. Like it definitely seemed like something that would be beneficial for a lot of people, but I don't know, I thought it was interesting that and great because like you hear so many times where like people just get thrown away
and then they're just gone from society forever.
Yeah, or they're stuck in the system for the rest of their life. Like it really sounded, and this is the reason why I don't think that she's a serial killer, is after leaving prison when she's 23, she served a total of 12 years, and you know, some of that was in the boarding school and some of that was in the open prison. I think that structure is all she really wanted in life, because I am, you know, going home and having who knows what would happen at her house, right? I imagine there was plenty of times where she just didn't even go home, and it gave her a structure that she could follow, and I think that any kid needs that. They need some sort of structure. Yeah.
Well, and also too, because like so she went to like the boarding school where I think she then got like a proper education and a proper like mental health doctor, like a therapist. I don't know why I said mental health doctor, a therapist, where she like had to learn. I like how they, instead of just throwing her in jail and leaving her and labeling her as a killer, because she did kill people. Yeah. But instead of just throwing her away, especially someone so young and still so malleable can change back, because I don't think if she wasn't raised in that situation, she would never have been a killer, in my opinion.
I agree.
I think she has psychopathic tendencies because she didn't know what was normal. She didn't know that really, really wasn't okay, because
she was raised a psychopath.
She was raised that way. She was raised to be that way. I mean, my mom was trying to kill me at the age of 3 multiple times.
Hey, and just a quick hot take, just like how no one's born a racist.
People become racist. Yeah, no one's born a racist, and yet by your family's beliefs or what you read or what you actually decide to believe, then you kind of become a racist.
So I think Mary Bell specifically, because there isn't a track of like she wasn't labeled a sociopath or any of those type of things, that some, not all, but some serial killers tend to have like that sort of, you know, mental health problem or mental health struggle. She didn't have any of that, so it was 100% a product. And I think the only reason why Mary Bell is so talked about is because when this incident happened, it was so popular in that area that's just carried over into the serial killer culture.
I think it is because it's, well, I mean, she's 11 years old. It's
fucking wild.
Shocking. But I think her case as well is like a great look for the psychology world of nature versus nurture. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to, are you a product of nature, or are you a product of your environment? And I think she was a product of her environment, because once she was taken out of her environment, given a structured life, she did go to jail. She was like, she couldn't, because she was in the open prison, but she did try to escape and had a 29-day penalty of where she couldn't leave that prison ever for not 29 days. And she never did it again.
I wish that there was more information about that, because I almost wonder if... I want to know if that was like a teenage rebellion thing, or if that was like, hey, I actually think that I'm better now.
Yeah, because she did it when she was really like... I think it's because, like, also, too, when you're... 12 years is still a long time to be held in a place, you know? So I think it was kind of like... Partially, I just don't think she really thought about it. I think she was probably just, like, testing her waters. Like, you know, testing the limits.
Yes,
see what she can kind of get away with.
Everyone does that when they're younger.
Well, especially when you're a teenager and you don't really get to have your rebellious phase because, you know, you murdered someone. So that's your consequence. Right. She took her punishment. She took her medicine.
Yep. She took her medicine.
As the Shining. Throwback. Oh my god, I have so... Oh, anyways. That was a side note. I forgot that we do a book podcast, if you guys don't know already.
Shout out.
It's great. Shout out to Read Between the Wines. We did The Shining once. And I started seeing this guy, and I was like, oh, listen to our podcast. And I knew that was a good episode. And we hung out recently the other day, and I, like, made a joke about The Shining, and I was like, I hate that movie. And he's like, oh, I know how you feel about The Shining. And I was like, how? And I was like, I listened to your podcast. And I was like,
God damn, it's happening.
I was like, oh no.
That's okay.
No.
Another funny side note that's not associated with true crime. When I started seeing my girlfriend, she listened to the podcast, and one of the first things she heard me say was me talking about beard rides. And how everyone seems to really enjoy them. And I was like, oh, fuck, I forget people can just watch the podcast and hear me talk.
I forget that people can just know everything if I just say it on the internet. It's great.
But anyways, to get back to Mary Bell, one of the other reasons why I truly think that she's not a serial killer is how she acted when she got out.
Yes, when she got out, she got full anonymity and
it's a hard word and I hate it. Anonymity?
Anonymity.
Anyways, what it means is you are completely anonymous. You're given a new name. You're basically given a new identity, so you aren't associated with who you were prior to this.
Will it work?
Trying to figure out how to pronounce words.
Oh, my computer's really slow right now. But anonymity. Anyways, whatever. But she got that when she was released. She got a new name when she was released. So the courts deemed her worthy enough for society because they gave her that. They gave her a new name and a new life, essentially, to start. Well, not really like give her a new life. Like, she didn't live comfortably afterwards. She had to work and be a normal person in society. And then
4 years later,
she had a daughter.
She had a daughter
who then also...
Anonymity.
God damn, that scared the shit out of me.
That was such a little delay.
Thanks, computer.
Let's turn off that volume. So...
That's some true crime right there.
That was terrifying. So they get it, and they give it... I didn't realize this, but technically, legally, her daughter was born with that safe net as well, that anonymity. I didn't even realize what it said because I was so shocked.
It shocked me.
But with Mary Bell getting that, technically her children aren't safe from that. I didn't realize that about the justice system. So Mary Bell actually had to go to court for her daughter.
Yeah.
To fight because the press, when I think her daughter was about 14, because I think when her daughter turned like 12 or 10, it kind of released the time period of it.
Right.
And the press were trying to get to her daughter, so they were able to get it for her daughter, so it was like illegal to...
There was even one circumstance where the press had gone and found where they were staying.
Yeah.
And they had to put like bed sheets over their face to escape and get out of there because Mary Bell didn't want that past haunting her. She didn't want her daughter to know what she did.
She didn't want anything to do with her past. Like, the only thing she ever had to do with her past was about a book, but especially when it comes to her daughter, she didn't want her daughter involved. So that's when they went to the courts and was like, you need to protect my daughter because what can I do? I have to leave my house with bed sheets over my face.
Right. And for the record, she did win that court case, so her daughter did have the full anonymity for the rest of her life as well as a granddaughter.
In 2009, she had her first granddaughter.
And all we know of hers, her name is Z, because they didn't want any of the names to go out there.
Mm-mm. Her name's Z, and she also got that right as well of anonymity. But yeah, and currently Mary Bell is 36 years old, living her life. No one really knows where, who, what, where, if she ever married, if she ever did anything. The only time she ever really talked about her murders, and I was reading, like, this one person gave her a lot of shit for it, because the thing is, I don't think what Mary Bell did was in any way okay.
No. But
I think if you really look at what happened to her as a child was not even remotely okay either. And it's what happened. And she did actually write a book about it. And she got like $50,000 to personally speak out about what she did, how she did it. And then talking about with this person of like how she like regrets it and like her life and like how she like and the book is mainly about what would you do if you were Mary Bell in this situation, and it talks a lot about Mary Bell's life as a child and what kind of drove her to it in a way of like how she doesn't even like she could never know what was right or wrong because she just
and I think too know. Like I don't know, this is we talked about this with John Wayne Gacy on the last episode.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't heard that one, make sure you go back and check it out. Website will be up soon.
Yes.
It's a fine line, right?
It's a fine line.
What she did was awful and heinous, but I think in her particular circumstance, it's a little bit different. And she probably did the $50,000 book deal to better herself and her family that she had at the moment.
And also, too, to be an advocate to kids in her situation, because it's like, not all kids in her situation are obviously going to, like, kill somebody, but it does lead to bad situations and bad, like, they might not kill somebody, but they might be, like, in a different way bad, but also they could be really good people. Every person's different. You can't really judge one person on something, especially with, like, how their childhood was. I mean...
Well, let's not pretend either that if she wanted to be that person to cash in on that, she could have made a lot more than $50,000.
Oh, yeah. And then she also wouldn't be protecting her children and grandkids from this point.
I really, honestly, like, so we have, like, set things that we like to talk about when we're doing this podcast, and one of them is, like, the turning point.
Yeah.
And I think there's a turning point for when she did the murders, when she committed them.
Yeah.
But I also think this might be the only time that we ever talk about a positive turning point. I think it is when she actually had that structure in her life and she realized that, like, oh, so life isn't just me getting sexually abused and strangled and having to go home terrified or all this type of stuff. And there is a bigger picture than me just being an object. And I think that she had that turning point and was able to switch her mindset, which I'm sure it was through lots of work and lots of struggle and lots of therapy and different things like that. But she was able to push through and realize, like, oh, I can actually have somewhat of a normal life. And she did. I mean, from what we know, right? I mean, a normal life is having a kid and, you know, going about your business. And that's all she seemed to want. Unless she is, like, something crazy now. We don't know about it. Because she would be what? She's born in 57?
She's 63 now.
So, I mean...
So she's a grandmother.
And her daughters would be what? Like, in their 30s.
Yeah. Her grandkid, if she was born in 2009, is 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, math.
Yeah, granddaughter. Yeah, so
her granddaughter's 11, so her daughter would be probably like 40 now.
Yeah.
Well, no.
She had it when she was 23, 28. She had it when she was 28, right? 27?
27 or 28, and then her daughter had a teen pregnancy. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who am I to judge?
No. Happens.
But
that's the thing, when we don't know a lot about her life, but I almost think that's a positive to take away from the situation, because
she's not banking on it.
She's not banking on it, and if she was bad and evil, I'm sure we would know about it.
She would continue on with it, but because like in her book, it's called "Cries Unheard: Why Children Kill: The Story of Mary Bell," and a lot of it just goes into her childhood and how it basically, even in the summary, it talks about her breaking point of like when she just doesn't, like, she almost disassociates because she's like, I don't know what life is.
Yeah.
And nothing makes sense. Because she doesn't, like, also, too, you gotta think this time, you don't get to see, like, what life really could be, or you don't get the classic sitcoms that have happy endings, you know, like, you don't see that. You only get to see what's real then and there.
And to go with the disassociation, right, like, you've seen The Haunting on Hill House, right?
Yeah.
The TV series. There was that scene where I think it was that show, I might be wrong, but where there was like an investigator and they were investigating like one of the girls. They were talking about some monster. Am I thinking of a different show? I think I might be.
Oh, no, you're thinking of, no, that's the right one where it was the one sister who can touch you and kind of see who you are as a person. And how...
Right, oh yeah, she was an investigator, and the one girl was saying that her house there was a monster downstairs in the basement. There was a monster
in her house.
But the reality is her stepdad or dad
her foster dad was
sexually abusing her, and she saw this piece of wood
that looked like a monster,
and she took all the trauma and horror from that and put it in this monster, when in reality the monster was the foster dad.
It was the foster dad, because she's a child psychologist.
Yeah.
Or no, is she a personal investigator?
One or the other.
She does a little bit of both, I think.
But regardless, that's a reality that we live in, where kids disassociate trauma because their brain's not developed enough, they can't handle it.
Yeah.
So I
And I mean, like,
There's a lot.
in my personal life, like, my mom left when I was 6, and, like, I didn't realize, like, how fucked up the situation was until I was, like, in the 8th, like, 10 years later.
Yeah.
It was basically about, like, when I was, like, she left when I was 6, like, the day after Christmas, never said goodbye, just left. And I never really associated, and I don't remember that, because I've always disassociated that as, it's okay, she's taking care of my sisters. And I always, like, put my mom almost in this different scenario of, like, what she was doing. Like, almost like she was being, like, a savior to my sisters, when in reality she was actually being, like, worse, giving my sisters a worse off situation. But it's, like, besides that, like, it doesn't even really matter. It's, like, it's just kids disassociate so easily because their brains can't comprehend how awful life is.
Yeah, it's so much knowledge to take in.
It's so much so quick, especially someone so young, especially at Mary Bell's age, where she's literally like a prostitute at the age of 5.
Yeah.
Like, no child should ever have to do that. Like, no person has to, like if you become one at 18 and it's consensual and that's what you want to do, that's one thing. Or, you know, and like, it's sad how many women get into that situation where they don't have the choice. They just have to do it.
Right.
And I mean, like, it's not always like, there's nothing wrong with, like, being a prostitute if that's what you want to do.
Right.
But in a situation where you don't have a choice, it's so easy to disassociate. And I think that's also partially too, if like the psychologist like put out the files on Mary Bell, that's probably why we don't know a lot about her as well, is because of the anonymity that she got. It probably sealed a lot of her records too. Yeah. So that's probably why we don't know a lot about her psyche at the time and how she probably overcame what happened to her, like, processing wise.
Yeah, well, I mean, she was in the system for
12 years.
12 years. That's a lot of time to get therapy and get help. And I don't know. I came out of the research on this one. Granted, there's not a whole bunch of stuff you can find.
Yeah.
But I came out of this one actually more positive instead of where Gacy. I felt like, oh my god, Gacy scared me.
Gacy scared me.
Where Mary Bell kind of like, and it's sad too because even nowadays, if you Google it, you just see this terrifying mugshot picture of her, like, dark eyes, dark hair.
I don't know if you guys can see that, but like,
yeah, like it's haunting.
Just look up a picture. It's just like the picture they pick of her is not.
And like, it's almost like we still make her out to be this terrible person, when in reality, like, once you know the whole story, you kind of feel for her in the sense that what she did was still bad, and I don't ever want to... It's tough when we start talking about things like this, right? Because the two victims didn't deserve anything, right? Like, Martin Brown and Brian Howe, like, those kids died at such a young age and didn't even understand what was going on, and that itself is so bad and so sad, and like, and it's tough to like really say something positive about the situation. Yeah. But I think that making Mary Bell out to be, maybe the 11-year-old Mary Bell was a monster, but 23-year-old plus Mary Bell wasn't. Yeah.
And that's like, it's a hard line, especially in this situation, because it's like she did take 2 lives. It is unforgivable, but doesn't mean, and not saying that we should start forgiving murderers, especially adult murderers, because when you're an adult, I feel like you know exactly what you're doing.
Absolutely.
I mean, in this case, you can I feel like this one is definitely a good, like, controversy of whether or not to forgive or forget in the situation, because definitely, like, even like the victims' families were outraged by her being able to go back into society 12 years later, and they were saying like, where's the protection for the victims, because you're giving the protection of the killer. But that just goes into the sense of, where do we, because like, I mean, it's a little political, but where do you put the line of trusting your justice system, in a sense, especially like in the UK, their justice system's a little bit, I don't know how it is there, but it sounds like a much better place than what we're getting with ours right now. Right. Because unlike, because what it sounds like from them is they took her for 12 years and basically raised her into being a person that's okay for society. Right. And like, instead of just like tossing her out into like, just like
Go wing
juvie or something and just kind of being like,
All
figure
right.
it out.
Yep. Good luck.
And then like when she's 18, you're like, all right, you go into society, you're alone. They kind of like reformed her. They made her a better person, and she became a better person because I don't doubt for a second they kept tabs on her her whole life. They probably still keep tabs on her to make sure she's not a murderer.
Well, and on top of the fact too, like if you put yourself in adult version Mary Bell's life, right?
Yeah.
If she really truly did recover, and became a
positive member of society.
A positive member of society, she's living with that demon every day.
She has to live with the fact of what she did every single day.
She killed 2 small children with her bare hands.
With her bare hands and then mutilated one of them.
Yeah.
But with that in mind too, it's like, I mean, from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Mr. Mosby hit someone with his car when he was drunk, and he still gets to live every day of his life.
Yeah.
You know, because they considered it manslaughter, not murder, because of how young she was. And that's where I think like the line really does draw, is because it was manslaughter, not murder.
Can we make tasteless jokes on here?
Yeah.
Bruce Jenner killed someone in a car, but Caitlyn Jenner sure didn't, apparently.
Good facts.
I guess we just forgot about that situation, right? Like,
just because you change your name and gender doesn't mean we're gonna forgive everything that happened in your other past.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, that's where it goes too. And I think it's at that point, it's kind of like that's your opinion, and you should believe what you want to think. If you don't think she should belong in society, that's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe, and like I get it. I understand where you come from. I think she's 63 now. She's living her life. We don't know anything about her. It's not like, I mean, even because we talked about it last episode with John Wayne Gacy's sister, but there's that the Craigslist killer's daughter has an entire TV show, and she's banking on the fact that her dad killed tons of people, and how she wants to help killers' family members cope with the fact by like talking to the victims' families. And like, to me, that's fucked up in a sense, because it's like, you didn't kill anybody, your dad did. Your dad was a monster, but now you're making the money by what your dad did. That to me is where I draw the line of what's okay and not okay. Like, I mean, I've watched the show a few times because like we're doing our research, and I want to hear how the family perceived this person, because it's like, obviously you don't really know anybody,
right?
Unless you don't know anybody, you just don't.
Yeah.
But like, to me, that's more sickening. And like, she did this book deal, which a lot of people give her shit for, because it's like, well, you're making money off the fact that you killed kids, but she's also bringing an awareness of what it's like to be a kid during the 60s, which during the 60s, kids had no rights whatsoever.
Right.
John Mulaney, the comedian, talks about how he's like, the most civil rights I've ever seen come into my lifetime were for children's rights. Yeah. Because children didn't have rights back then. So I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, working grown man factory jobs and shit.
Like kids were shit on so much back then. And I think Mary Bell was just unfortunate. And I mean, like, don't get me wrong, there are some children serial killers we can get into that are just messed up in the head.
Yep.
And that's kind of like where it goes back to like,
it's case by case.
It's case by case. And I just think in Mary Bell's situation, it was nurture, not nature. But then you go to like a Dahmer, where it's definitely in their nature, because from the beginning he was killing, decapitating, skinning and like dissolving animal bones and body parts. Like, so that's from like the beginning of like, I think that's just in his nature.
Right.
But I think, and you could tell that because it goes into their later life, and not that like everyone that killed an animal as a kid is going to be a murderer, but it does give that kind of tendency of like, that is the first sign. She didn't really even have that as much. Like, she didn't really have that sick pleasure of doing it. It just, she did it to these kids because it was happening to her. So I think it was that disassociation. But,
Absolutely.
Everyone has their opinions. You could be totally wrong with this and think that she doesn't deserve anything.
Oh, yeah. And I definitely sit on the fence with the book deal still a little bit. But I like what you said with the whole idea of, like, did she do the book strictly for money, or did she do the book to try and, like, tell her story and raise awareness? And that's always a fine line.
That's a fine line. And I think, too, you have to think, she might also wanting to be saving her reputation because her mom was selling all of their secrets on the side besides her own. Her mom was just telling everybody about Mary Bell, not what her mom was doing to her.
Yeah.
That's what was hush hush, and that's why we know what happened to Mary Bell as a kid, mostly because of what Mary Bell told this author. Which, I mean, also, too, that's all she made. If she did a book now on her own, fucking millions.
Serial killer culture would eat it up.
And then her kids would have royalties. She would have royalties.
She could go start doing podcasts. She could do podcasts.
Yeah, if she was like, I want to come out and start living my story and making money, that's when it's like, okay.
That's
you gotta not do that because you gotta live with what you did.
That's why I take away a more positive than negative from this is like going into like the 2000s where serial killers and murder and stuff like that culture started becoming like cult fans.
Yeah.
Like there was fans of serial killer culture. Like, and like
even today
both of us are fans of how crazy it is.
I like the true crime aspect, but it's not like I'm not gonna like get a tattoo or buy any merchandise of this serial killer on it.
No.
Like I'm more interested in the psychology. I love psychology. I was going to become a psychologist. I was going to be a criminal psychologist for the longest time because it was so fascinating to think of. Because I'm just like that kind of person. I like to put myself in someone else's shoes, and it's really hard to understand and get into some like a murderer's shoes because you're like, I could not fathom.
So vastly different.
And that's where like it's really interesting the psychology of like everything, especially like the psychology of like Mary Bell. There's not a lot out there because I think. Well, and I think that's goes to, I don't know how it is in England, but like I know like laws here is that like if you do like a crime at a certain age, it gets kind of like hush and sealed in your records.
Yeah. Because
you're a minor.
Right. Same here a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was talking about. They have something here that like seals the records. Because what was it? There's another crime that, like, if they would have just opened their records, but because it happened when they were a minor, they couldn't legally do it without, like, subpoenas and warrants, but there wasn't enough information. But if they would have had the records, they would have, like, solved it faster or something. I don't know. That might have also been a TV show. I just love crime.
Right. And that's the thing. I'm the same way, right? I think crime, especially in 2020, is the most interesting aspect of just life because it's still going on. I don't think it will ever stop. And getting in the minds of serial killers or just murderers or cults or whatever it might be is like the last dying, well, not dying, but the last like taboo thing that isn't ever going to be allowed in culture. Yeah,
it's definitely not. Well, it's just sticky. Everyone has their opinions on it, and that's why it's like you just gotta respect other people's opinions. Like, when I was talking about that guy last podcast about how he would sell paintings for John Wayne Gacy, and he literally was like, oh, I'm just a collector, but if someone burned my house down and didn't hurt any of my family and destroyed all my memorabilia, or he's like, if I died and my family just set my house on fire,
oh well,
I just liked collecting it. It'd be cool if it went to a museum, but if someone deemed it not, or decided to destroy it, it wouldn't bother me because I find it fascinating, but I don't care about it. Right. It's just cool to look at.
Yeah, I think that's true crime in general. It's fascinating.
It's fascinating,
and it's real, because like we could have a podcast about fantasy books, but it's not.
It's not reality.
It's not reality.
It's not something that'll happen.
It's the most dramatic thing that's in reality. True crime is drama that is real.
It's real drama.
It's cases like this, Mary Bell. I think there's a lot to learn from it, and I think people could take away some interesting stuff that could be viable.
Yeah, I think it helps. In the psychology world, especially like learning about children and like understanding like the nature versus nurture, why it's such a big hot topic. And like I don't know how you stand on it, but I think everyone's a product of their nurture and just a tiny bit of their nature. I don't think there's one or the other. I don't think it's black or white. I think it's a little bit of both, but I think a majority of it is their nurture.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I think that there's very few cases where it is nature.
Yeah.
Because like even your most famous serial killers had some sort of fucked up childhood.
Yeah.
In some way or the other.
They had something that like was their turning point into why they are the way they are. But I think there's also a little bit of something in your nature to be 100% okay with that, because like something that might have happened to Ted Bundy probably happened to another guy, but this guy didn't go and murder people, but this guy did.
Right.
You know, it's like that's why I think it's like a mixture of both, because I think there still has to be a chemical imbalance to be like, oh, that happened, I'm gonna continue doing my thing.
Right. And I mean, I think too, one thing that is sad is when there's labels that get thrown around, right? Because Ted Bundy was what, a sociopath? Or
yeah.
Because there's sociopath, psychopath, different things like that, but Bundy didn't feel empathy for anything he was doing, right?
Yeah.
But there's people who live with that who are very successful and very well ingrained in society.
Also like a narcissist as well.
Yeah, like
there's I mean, just because, yeah.
So I think that it does have to be a combination of both, because I don't think that everyone who might fall under just like this category or this blanket isn't going to end up being a serial killer. That it's like a spectrum, right? Like you could be a sociopath but still be 100% an amazing human being. Yeah. You know, and I know one specifically. Great, awesome, very productive, does a lot of things for society. He just happens to have that diagnosed in that part of his brain that just, because of how he was born, it just doesn't work.
It just doesn't work.
And there's nothing, you can't discredit that person, but because of how media is, he still gets discredited.
It just gets discredited, yeah. And I think that's where also too, like, talking about like some other child killers, like, I mean, like the BTK.
Yeah.
Butcher, torture, kill.
Yep.
BTK. I learned the what it actually means, and now I can remember how his name goes. I mean, he like killed his mom, didn't he? And that's like kind of where it started.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about him later. But like, it kind of just goes to like every person's different. Everyone has different chemicals in their brain. Everyone is functioning different. So it's kind of like you can make your judgments all you want about somebody. My personal opinion is I think Mary Bell did something so heinous that it is unforgivable, but she's making herself a product in society that's helpful and is good.
Yeah.
And I think her telling her story and selling her story was like,
It's on the fence.
It's on the fence, definitely. But the fact that she doesn't really get royalties from it, and she's not really making money from it nowadays, and she's not actively trying to seek out publicity. She's not trying to be famous from what she did. She wants to. Right. She just wants to be not known from the world. Yeah. She just wants to, you know.
And maybe, and I can't speak for her, but maybe doing the book deal was part of her trying to cope with what she did.
Maybe it was her way of redeeming herself to explain herself.
Yeah.
You know,
there's definitely a lot of different possibilities, and we'll never know. I think that if she didn't come out by now, she probably will die, and we'll never know what her name is now. Or I don't see her kids probably coming out, because if they wanted to cash in on it, like the kid's probably 40-ish. Yeah. Probably would have already happened.
It would have happened by now. And also, they wouldn't have gone to great lengths to get that anonymousness for every generation. Yes. I wouldn't even be surprised if her grandkids go through that, too. Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they had, like, something in the court system. Maybe not, like, after that. Like, maybe not her great-great-great-grandkids, but her great-grandkids, maybe even. Right. Because, I mean, her granddaughter now is dealing with that. Yeah. Of being secret. And I don't know if that's, Rose Bundy, Ted Bundy's daughter. No one has any clue of what she is. It just depends on the person. That's why I don't, nothing against the Craigslist killer's daughter and having a TV show. If that's her way of coping with what her dad did, fine, do whatever. But I do still think it's slimy a little bit, because it's like, if someone murdered my best friend or like my family member, I really would not want to hear from another family member to apologize for the killer.
I wouldn't give a shit.
I would be like, I appreciate that you knew what someone in your family did was wrong, but it doesn't matter because they still did what they did and you didn't, and I don't know why you're apologizing when
Right.
they should be apologizing slash what does it matter at this point? My loved one's gone.
Yeah, I haven't done enough research and don't know the specifics of what she's doing with that whole thing, but
it's the show's just the pretense is like as she's helping like the episode with John Wayne Gacy's sister, she's helping that person cope with the fact that they're like in this case her brother did something bad and going to the victims' houses to kind of talk about it and like just mostly just to apologize and be like
I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
I would have to watch it before I want to give any judgment, but firsthand, like
just watching it was just like I would not want to be involved.
Typically, right, like when it's been a long enough time period, you probably don't want some fucking asshole coming and bringing stuff back up, like. And
also, I don't even think I would want to see my killer's siblings.
No, you're putting more faces to the trauma.
You're putting more people behind it. It's like, why didn't you stop your brother? But it's like you can't. But the thing is, logically, you can't put that on the sister either because the sister didn't know what was going on. Literally, the mom was living in the house and didn't really know what was going on. She knew something was up, but she didn't know.
Yeah.
She wasn't gonna. She wasn't gonna like not trust her son. She was just like, oh, maybe he's just a little bit of a weirdo.
Yeah.
But like, cause you want to be like then mad at the mom. You want to be mad at the sister. But it's like, there's only one person to be mad at is the killer. Yeah. But
at the same time, I get where you're coming from. It does. Hearing how you've explained it, it does sound slimy. And it does sound like a money grab.
Yeah.
And I personally I don't know how someone feels who's had someone murdered in their life, but I imagine
I wouldn't know.
From what you can read, I imagine it is just awful. And if I was a family member of a victim of John Wayne Gacy's back when he was running rampant, and we're now 20 years after, 30 years after.
Yeah, right. It was 71 when he got captured, so about 40 years now.
So like, I don't want to fucking hear about it. Anymore. I've had to hear about it my whole life. At that point, I want to try and move on.
Yeah, like I don't want to have to be thinking about my son who was 15 who died, would be 55 right now, and I should be having grandkids kind of thing. I don't want to have that kind of mentality.
Yeah, that's how
That's where I know as a person, I think more of like future wise, and I think of every little detail, and I think of like if I had a son and he died. Wow, I'm missing out on grandkids, maybe even great-grandkids because of someone killing. But that's where it's like...
It could be different. Maybe there is someone who wants to hear
an apology. Yeah, and that's why, too, like, they're not, like... It's not like they're, like, going to these people's houses and, like, banging on the door and be like, let me apologize. It's like it's formal, it's set up, both parties agree to it. So it's not like they're, like, ambushing. It is both parties agreeing. I just don't know how those people agreed to talk about it because it's so... Yeah.
Money talks. I'll go talk about anything if someone's like, hey, you want 10 grand? Yeah, I'll say whatever you want me to say.
Yeah, I guess I'll talk about my son's death with you, stranger.
Yeah, weirdo.
Yeah, but I guess maybe like that's their way. And like no judgments. If that's what you gotta do to cope, that's what you gotta do to cope. But I just personally think it's a little bit of a money grab. Yeah. But I think it's just a little slimy extra as well.
I think there should be laws and regulations on what can make money, and I definitely don't think people dying should be something you can make money off of. But I digress. Maybe we don't know. Maybe all the money's going to some charity.
Maybe I don't
That's
know.
The case. Full send.
Full send. Yeah. I mean, maybe.
But if her wallet's looking a little chubby because of this, that's not okay. That seems.
It's a double-edged sword for damn sure.
Right.
But.
Well, I think that I covered everything on Mary Bell because we ended up going over the non-mainstream stuff that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Because like we said, there's just a lot of the facts that are out there about her. I mean, it's limited. It's limited,
and I think a lot of it is just because of how young she was, and also too, no one saw her do it, and her and Norma couldn't really get their story straight together, and it kind of tricked things up because it's like, who do you believe, and after the fact it was murdered, it's like, well, now she's talking to her therapist, so it's like, that's when it comes confidential. So we don't really know the whole We know the story. We just don't know the truth.
Yeah.
The full truth. But we
And
know everything that's important.
what I was saying earlier about a different child serial killer situation was the Slender Man one. I don't know all the details, but basically, from my understanding, is a girl. She moved to a new city or whatever. She was kind of all edgy a little bit.
Yeah.
And she had like 2 friends. And I might be misquoting, right? Because I've only done a tad bit of research on it because I played the Slender Man games. I'm like, what the fuck?
This is just like a little side bonus
Yeah,
episode.
little
Basically,
side clip for you.
yeah. If you're good on what you need to know about Mary Bell, then you're good.
Yeah, you're good. Stick around though. We're gonna tell you what's coming up.
It's good stuff.
Basically, she made a friend and she started convincing her that this Slender Man was talking to her.
Oh.
And then they brought in another friend, and the main girl and the other girl took the third friend out into the woods and stabbed her in the name of Slender Man.
Yeah.
Because, and I believe that both kids ended up getting in trouble. Yeah. And both kids are now in like today's equivalent of an insane asylum. Mm-hmm. I want to know, though, if the Slender Man thing was something that she fabricated or if the Slender Man thing is someone online telling her to do this stuff.
That's a good question.
That's the thing that interested me because, in 2000, I can't remember when it happened, but Tumblr was around, horror stories, creepypastas.
Before, things kind of got, censored a little bit more.
Yeah.
It was very much readily available.
It's very easy for someone to pretend to be Slender Man online and convince a little girl to go do some things for her.
That reminds me of this movie. It's on Netflix. It's called, I think, Mercy Black. And it's the same situation, except not Slenderman. It was, this, fabricated monster. They actually watched the movie. It's so...
Is it The Rake? Is that the story about the rake? Or no? Might be wrong.
It's the exact same formula. These two, it starts off with this girl basically leaving a mental asylum or a mental facility and joining society, and it's her past was she went in there because her friend stabbed another girl and died, and she was just kind of the accomplice, not the murderer. Mm. But, so it's the same situation. You should watch it. I'll send it to you. It's actually pretty spooky. It's, very cheesy, but it's really good. Oh, look at...
I was just...
All the
yeah, just checking. But yeah, so, coming up next for us, now...
Yes.
One thing that I haven't figured out yet, I will be gone the weekend of July 23rd. It's my B-Day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because your B-Day is the...
20th. Mine's Monday, yours is a Thursday, it sounds like.
Yeah, fucking Thursday.
Fucking Thursday.
Who likes having birthdays on Mondays and Thursdays?
Bullshit, literally.
But, so we won't do a podcast this weekend, or this upcoming weekend, so the 11th and 12th. We would do on the 18th, so it would actually skip over our birthday week.
Yeah, so it'd be right before our birthday week, and then we'll come back the weekend after.
Right.
2 weeks after our birthday, I guess.
So on the 18th, we were in talks of what we want to do next.
Yes.
And I'm open to discuss, because I'm definitely never dead set, because anything can be interesting.
Yeah, that's why, if you have any ideas, or if you want us to cover something, email us at truecrimedrunks@gmail.com. Let us know what you want to hear.
Yeah. Very easy email, truecrimedrunks@gmail.com. It's
that easy.
It's not spelled weird. There's no underscores. You don't got to worry about it.
It's just straight True Crime Drunks.
Now, I pitched Golden State Killer just because he is fully convicted. Right?
He's fully convicted. He's finally been sentenced, and I feel like it's so relevant.
I mean, it's a hot topic right now. Is there another serial killer that was... I mean, he wasn't necessarily active because he was in the system for a while now, from my understanding.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's been captured for a little bit, but now he's, officially sentenced and all
right.
that fun jazz.
But there's no other serial killers that are active in the news.
That we know of.
So
because the theory is there's, 200 active serial killers in the United States currently that we could kind of know of, but there's probably 2,000 active serial killers easily that we don't have any clues on, because
You never know.
You never know, because it doesn't become a serial killing until you have the person and you find that they killed multiple people.
Right.
So without finding the person who did him, you don't know if it's a serial killer or just murders.
Right.
Anyways,
So with the Golden State Killer too, there could be some hot takes because I believe that he was a cop for a long time too.
Yeah, he was a cop for a little bit, and that's where it's a very sticky situation.
Yeah.
Because
So if you want to commit to that one for the next one, we can.
I think we should do that one next, and then we can go on to some other fun ones. Because we're thinking about then also doing so we'll do one more serial killer, and then we're gonna do something a little bit different. We're not sure if we want to do like someone's death or a missing person or maybe even a cult.
Cult would be cool.
A cult would be really cool and really fun, I feel like. And I don't know why, but summers always make me think of cults. I don't know why.
Interesting.
Well, because my favorite thing I learned in psychology is correlation does not mean causation. And the rise in ice cream sales and the rise of murders are correlated, but they're not
causation.
It's not the causation. Just because the price or murders go up doesn't mean people are buying my ice cream more. It's just because it's warmer weather, it's easier to kill people. Is why.
Interesting.
It's a correlation, but not causation.
Yeah.
One does not cause the other as a reason, but it's a correlation. So I feel like I always associate cults because they're always taking pictures in the spring.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Also then Midsummer too helps a lot.
Yeah.
Midsummer,
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10, good movie. But that's where I correlate, but I don't cause it because I know that's not really the case.
I don't remember what we were doing here.
Oh, I was actually listening to a lot about there's this on the topic of it's in England. There was this guy who was he would murder people, but as a vampire.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot that we
kind of talked about.
Yeah,
that's where
okay.
It was killer cover up because he was I'm a vampire, not
right.
a killer. Or I guess I'm a killer, but it's okay because I'm a vampire. Something like
right.
crazy.
So if you guys have something that you want covered, email.
We'll do it.
We'll do it.
We're just here for a good time.
Not a long time, but a good time.
A good time. Hopefully a long time, but
I hope so.
I hope so.
At least a hot minute. Shall we close it out then?
I think we're good. Yeah. Also, the website's going to be up sometime this week. It's going to be truecrimedrunks.com. It's going to be super simple. That's the domain, just truecrimedrunks.com. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook for Top Shelfers, and then I always do this. I don't know why I can't. But follow me on Instagram if you want, Books, Coffee, Bees. That's just kind of where I post horror-related stuff. I love horror. Yeah, I think that's all that there is. We're going to do the Golden State Killer for sure next week, and then come up with some ideas. We'll do whatever you want to do after that.
Yeah.
We're open to the possibilities of being whatever.
Yep. Thank you guys for listening, and
have a great day.
Have a great day. Mary Bell did good at getting better after her killing.